Hello, everybody. Welcome to the talkers. Today we are going to speak about the topic of the relation between the British, United Kingdom, and Russia and Ukraine. Why are the government, or maybe the people, I don't know, in United Kingdom so involved in this conflict? Sometimes I have the impression, it's a personal feeling at least, that the British governments do more, push more in Ukraine than the United States government. So I'm asking myself, and I'm going to ask a question to the other talker here, why? Why are they so involved in this conflict? And first, we are going to have Prata. We are going to give him 5 minutes. Prata, 5 minutes to make us an historical background about the relation between these three countries. So, your turn to begin, Prata.
It is very complicated to understand how much the United Kingdom is interconnected also in their recent history with India and the Asian continent by itself. So the Portuguese were the first Europeans that actually managed to achieve a route to the Asian continent that was faster, steadily, more feasible. It was actually the first one is in 1498. It kept going, and in 1580 the Portuguese had a kind of dynastic problem. Then in the 1640s they had to kick out the Spanish, and in doing that they needed allies. So they went asking the British for help. And the British just wanted money. The Portuguese wanted to give them a small village called Bombay, which is nowadays Mumbai. The British didn't want it. They just wanted really money. It was very difficult. Everybody all over the world was collecting money to give the British to help the Portuguese against the Spanish. And nevertheless, in 1640, the British did accept Bombay. And they didn't really know what to do with it, but they suddenly realized how much important was Mumbai or Bombay back then. It was actually a bit later when they noticed how much the Dutch were actually also trying to invest in the Orient, that they realized how much money the Orient could bring. Around in the 1700s, the British started the Industrial Revolution. But their first Industrial Revolution produced products, and they wanted to export those products. The second, more or less, industrial phase of the British, which is not just British, it's in many other countries as well, is to impose to other countries their industrial products. Suddenly, you have a third phase, which is expanding industrial production to other parts of the world. So the British are concentrated in Americas, which they'll lose very fast. And secondly, they will try to do that in India as well. India was actually, and China as well, the main industrial production centers on the whole world, especially India with textiles, China with all types of luxury products, India as well with spices and other exotic products. And what the English will try to do is the Dutch tried before, but they didn't still had the technology for it. What the British will try to do is to impose to wherever they were, impose those new technologies to increase production. So, with the invention of the steam motor, we have boats moved by streams, rails, and so on. So one of these, they increased, because they had this technology at the beginning, they increased the flow of products all over the world. First, imposing industrial technology production in many parts of the world, India, Americas, and so on. Secondly, imposing the fast track of products, either through the steam boats or through railways. Now, what we see is that this expansion has now finished. And by the middle, actually a little bit before, so around 1830s, the British understood there is something else that they could even make more money about. Is producing machinery for the rest of the world to produce more quantity. So they start focusing not so much in the industrial production, but in the production of industrial machinery to sell to the whole world. And this means imposing to the Indians and to the Chinese industrial, the selling of this new machinery to their industrial products, not grain, not textiles, but more than that, industrial products to all these countries. So we have the first opium wars in China to make the Chinese open because they were very rich, they had a lot of capital, in order to impose them to buy more Western products. We have in India all types of impositions in terms of law. Well, first, the expansion through India to conquest more or impose to more sultanates, or in India their protectorate, and imposing with that also their rules and their industrial production. And we also see something, because that's where I'm going to Ukraine, is that somewhere in time Russia wakes up. This immense land mass that has been expanding since the 1600s, or it was 1700s, to the east, now starts to produce something the whole world needs. The development of medicines, of healthcare, of better conditions in cities is improving the life quality of people all over the world. So population is growing, but there is a problem. There is not enough grains for everybody. And this is going to be, Russia appears around in the 1800s as the biggest producer of grains, shipping grains to the east of Europe. The Russians start building the first railways from Russia, from Middle Siberia or Urals to the Western Europe, and they start expanding as well to Central Asia. And that's when the British start getting crazy. In 1859, the French start the construction of the Suez Canal. They actually finished or opened the Suez Canal in 1869. In 1869, the Russians are already in Central Asia, all over almost to Afghanistan, and the British are getting scared. If the Russians build railways way to Central Asia to India, there is no way the British can still control the Asian Europe commerce, because railways will be faster than even stream boats carrying merchandise to Europe. So the first thing they do is almost at the same time starting to invading Afghanistan, the country in the middle. From 1838, which is just 1 year before the first Opium War, or in 1842, a few years before the Second Opium War, the British will try to conquest Afghanistan. Also, one interesting event is the fact that Buddhists, when the Russians achieve the expansion to the Buryats, the Buddhist Turks almost in the Mongol area frontier, they start making cultural connections with Tibet, and they wanted pretty much to make a kind of alliance. A Russian embassy just went to Tibet. The British got so scared they had to invade Tibet at that time. So the British created this idea of the Great Game, which is the Russians expanding to the east, and the British trying to stop the expansion to the east in order to keep the so-called Western routes, not around Africa, but to the Suez Canal, but still the Western route, in order to block industrial expansion to the east. They were very successful. They conquested Afghanistan. Afghanistan never constructed any types of railways, and it stayed like a complex country. Within the Second World War, Iran was almost like the solution, the railway constructions through Iran to the Soviet Union, which was supplying the Soviets with weapons to combat the Nazis. And the West, not more the British, but as well the British with the United States, tried to create instability into Iran so that the Soviets couldn't expand to Iran, because it was impossible to do it through Afghanistan. Nevertheless, if you look at the modern times, let's go a bit further, we see that the invasion of Afghanistan has a clear message. Well, the Soviet Union is finished, but the Russians start already in the 90s with the BRICS groups, Russia, India, China. India and China are two major allies of Russia, even after the end of the Soviet Union. They keep good relations. But India and China are getting into confront with another more and more. And that actually makes the Russians very uneasy, and they try to make the both sit on the same table, and they create the BRICS. The BRICS will suddenly, in 2006, because of Lula da Silva, expand to BRIC. And when they understand there is actually a world connection, they actually even bring South Africa into it. The United States invades Afghanistan in the 2000s. It brings the British. The British is one of the biggest allies of the United States to invade Afghanistan. So the biggest stone between connecting India to Russia and Russia to Asia, to Europe. China is very easy. They are interconnected. Nobody can do anything about it. So that's the Belt and Road Initiative that it's almost in the same time will come to light, and we'll see the first fruits in 2017, 2018, and until now. What we understand is when 2 years ago the Americans decided to leave Afghanistan because they couldn't keep it, the British got really nervous. The British got really nervous and they wanted to stay in. The problem was nobody wanted to stay in Afghanistan. So they were like almost left alone. On the end, they also needed to leave Afghanistan. But at the same time, the British had to re-question their ability to stop the creation of a whole Asian continent connecting with Europe. They left Europe with the BRICS, and now they didn't have Afghanistan, so they had to create in Ukraine the biggest something in order to block that development. You see, now the the Belt and Road Initiative, the old Silk Road, goes actually through China, Central Asian countries, or through Mongolia, or through even Eastern Russia, connects to Moscow, and from Moscow goes through Belarus, Europe. But it would be much more intelligent to connect actually Ukraine through it. The several rail connection there is through Ukraine would make the whole connection much more feasible. So one of the problems about the previous existing line is that when they come to Belarus, the Polish authorities don't have enough capacity to transfer all those trains in Russian gauge to European standard gauge. So many of those trains actually go to Kaliningrad, the containers go on boat, and from boat they go to West Germany, because the Polish don't have enough capacity. If we had enough rail tracks to Ukraine, which are almost like 3 different rail tracks, that problem wouldn't be there. You wouldn't need any transshipment through ships, and that would make the difference. So in my vision is that this war, the British interest in this war is to stop any connection between Eurasia or Asia itself with Central Europe. That's their point. And I think one of the biggest, this is the main reason why they are so intensely engaged in this war, is that although they have not, little to gain but that, to maintain Europe development closed, split it from Asia. But I hope you guys have some contributions for my view. Sorry for taking
I'm
more
going
than 5 minutes.
to ask no Felix to Badcat. And first, I'm going to thank you, Prata, for your very short 5 minutes, isn't it? Ah, not bad. 5 minutes, yes, sure. Okay, and Badcat, please. Am I wrong or right to think that the British government is at the frontline effort for the Western world in Ukraine?
Yes, I agree. But even with half your statement, I would say they are at the forefront, but not necessarily on behalf of the Western Front. Right? They are playing their own game here. But let me just take a step back because I think it's important to understand from the ground right here in the UK the public perception versus what the government is doing and the international perception. From the public perception, okay, since Brexit, which honestly has been a tough pill to swallow, but has been swallowed by British people, right? Because that's the culture here. Even if you make wrong decisions, you take it in the chin and you move forward. You're an adult, you're a grown man, so you're going to move forward with the decision, whatever you did. Because at the time, a lot of people didn't understand the wider impact that it could have. So that was I would say the original sin. Since then, the COVID hit. The pandemic was a disaster in the UK. It was very poorly managed, like some of the other countries, but very poorly managed. Then we had an energy crisis, a significant increase in energy prices in the UK due to several factors. Then we had inflation like we've never seen before. The highest in any developing country, like 10% plus. And then the Ukraine war. So right now, the perception of the public is that they don't really care about the Ukraine war. It's all about the economy and the situation in the UK. On average, since the shake-up of the ministers, with the one minister who did only 40 days, Liz Truss, last year, there's been a big crisis around interest rates, right? And mortgage rates. It's one of the only country where people who take mortgage to buy properties are taking a 2-year fixed interest rate property and then goes on to variable rate. It's not the case in the US, it's not the case in France. And after the explosion of interest rate, what it means is that on average, every single household with a mortgage in the UK will see an increase of £500 in their monthly mortgage payment. That is huge, right? So it's like 30 to 50% increase. I personally saw a 50% increase in my mortgage payment. So you can imagine that the focus of the British people is far from the war in Ukraine. They have a daily impact with inflation. Cost of everything is rising dramatically, increased by the fact that Brexit is not going as expected. So there's a big disconnect, I would say, between what the public is seeing here and the focus, which is really the cost of living, energy prices, and the economic crisis, and the world perception and the world politics, which is all about UK's effort in the Ukraine war. Okay. So just wanted to start with that. Then,
Okay.
you have to go. So what the UK is doing right now in Ukraine, you have to understand that Brexit, one of the main drivers of Brexit is for the UK to regain its independence and regain its status as a major power in the world. That's been hard to achieve because the negotiation with the EU bloc for, like the exchange trade have been very hard. And the UK has not been seen as winning anything there. They have been struggling and they are still struggling. So they are kind of like losing the opinion of who's like having a better deal with the Brexit. So they're not doing well. In economic terms, they are doing horribly. So they are not winning anywhere. So what Boris Johnson saw in the Ukraine war was an opportunity for the country to really be at the forefront of the resistance, right? The fight against the all evil Russians. So they jumped, all everything to go ahead of the pack, be the first to announce, military aid to Ukraine, be the first to deliver tanks to Ukraine, ahead of the American as well. And right now, if we are looking at the total package and commitments, the UK has pledged about 4.5 billion pounds in military aid to the Ukraine war, almost as much as the EU altogether. So they're really here trying to compete in the worldwide scene to be seen as like a number one, like a very strong military power. So it's all about perception and the place in the world post-Brexit.
So for you, it's mainly about prestige, about to look the strongest as possible.
Yes, they need to have to understand. After Brexit, there are several things that were going on, right? They have been establishing partnership and relationship with the world. They've tried to enter into some trade agreements with the Asia Pacific regions. They failed. They tried to increase those import and export with those countries. They failed. The national economic situation is bad. So again, here it's a failure. So they have failed post-Brexit on so many fronts that right now, maybe one of the silver linings, one of the only front where they have chances to be more successful, and we can define success later, but it's in the military front. They have one of the strongest tank out there, and they're sending it to. We can discuss that as well, but it has a reputation after the Iraq War being like impenetrable. Anyway, it just been destroyed like a few days after they delivered the first few tanks. There's a video that's been authentified of one tank's having been destroyed. So here you go. But yeah, that's where they can shine, right? They're sending a lot of money. They have very good technology in terms of military, and they're using it. They're sending the missiles, the Storm Shadows. So that's how they're making headlines, right? We're the first to send tanks, strongest tanks out there. We are sending long-range missiles. We're the first one to do it. That's how it's a communication, I think, battle more than anything else right now.
Oh, sure. What do you think of the attitude of the British government?
Yeah, so I think very good things have been said by Prata and Badcat, and you can almost see this contrast between two historical eras within the United Kingdom, where the reality that the United Kingdom was a political global leader and an economic global influencer was very much true in the 1800s Victorian era, all the way stretching it to World War I and World War II. But then afterwards, Britain kind of enters this like phase where they want to be that leader. They want to be that economic force. They want to be that military interventionist like leader, and they join in on all these things. Like, can they actually do it in reality? I think it's a bit stretched. So they have to kind of play their cards very carefully, right? So, like, listening to Badcat, like I really agree, like that the UK is a country that is looking for a win. They've tried to leave the EU, and in leaving the EU, did they gain too much? Like they already had their own currency. They already did their own thing. But the main thing is that they were hoping that they could actually have some pull on the international stage, make alliances, make an impact. And everything so far has not really been successful. Like, they tried to rally around the Commonwealth. That wasn't very effective. They tried to take leadership in other areas, making new alliances. but that has also not really borne much fruit. And then COVID hit, and during that time, not many countries would actually list the UK as a leader in any sense in that area. So I think it affects both the public and the government in that they're looking for a way to get that old, like Britain on top, Britain as a leader aspect. And I think there's several areas that they're trying to do. And one of them is they hark back on the fact that the UK has been a quote unquote historical moral leader, in that if you look back even within the French Revolution, during World War II, Britain has always hosted governments. They've always supported governments in exile. London has always been a host for movements, even if they're not supported in the country anymore, that Britain views as the moral or the correct leader. And I think that's one way they can get success. They see Ukraine as much the same. Like, if Ukraine falls, like, the government of Ukraine probably will move either to Poland under British guidance or to Britain. But it's even better if they actually have some success in that area. By propping up a country on the basis of kind of like this democratic, moral, European values, all these catchphrases, they almost take the leadership away from the EU, which on paper is supposed to promise it. But if the UK can intervene and actually rally people behind these things, they take leadership, and then they gain that success and victory that they craved, which was influence over Europe without Europe influencing them. And the other thing about it is you kind of look at the UK and you ask yourself, in this world, where do they fit? Like, are they a country that can influence Europe? In some ways, they're trying their best there. Are they a country that can influence Asia? Most of Asia does not listen to the leadership of the UK anymore. Africa, they've pulled out. North America, South America, firmly into the US. So they're trying to carve out this niche so that if you're going to talk about Europe, you have to talk about to the EU, but you also need to talk to this country that's in Europe, but not part of the European system, which is the United Kingdom. They really want to be one of the members at every table for every European conflict, crisis, or thing like that. I think the second part is economy. And I agree with Prata. Like, the UK in the 1800s with the Great Game, even the early 1900s, even when they're fighting the French in the continental system, has always wanted to be a very relevant and very strong economy. In the past, the UK can always look behind them and see all their colonies pulling in their economic might. But now that's no longer the case. They don't have any major sources outside of their home islands. So what could they provide? And ironically, one of the things that they did provide for the rest of the world was a banking system with no morality, which is why Londongrad, right? All the Russian banking, all the Eastern European money was washed through London because it benefited the UK home isles, but also provided a resource without actually having control over real, like, hard assets. So that's why the UK is a financial capital. But as the world is shifting away from like using the UK as like a financial center, as they're disconnected from the EU, I think the only way that the UK can compete is by not competing. And what I mean by that is that if you take leadership and you cordon off areas of trade and you make sure that the cheaper economic assets, more competitive industries, which are rising in Asia, Africa, are not even allowed to go into a gated garden such as Europe, then the UK is relevant in that area. If you don't need to compete with manufacturers within Eurasia through the Belt and Road, then the UK can compete. So in some ways, I think these two things, like, they're craving a win, and they need to carve out a place both economically and also politically, is probably the reason why the UK has been so enthusiastic. And the last thing I want to finish off with is the UK's greatest strength in some ways is that they do control the English language in a way that their stories, their headlines, if they're written in English, written in BBC, you can say something and everybody will listen. You can say the Challenger 2 is invincible and everybody would listen. If the article about the Challenger 2 was only in Russian, nobody would even know about it. So I think this is probably why the UK is pushing very hard, at least in a facade or like an upfront way to dress up the Ukraine conflict to emphasize their strengths.
Okay, I wanted to add two things about all that before I let Prata tell what he thinks about the situation. The first thing is that I think you are right, Shu, to speak about the role of the banking system, because the city in London is really integrated in the Western world finance system. And when the de-dollarization is going to hit really hard in the United States, there is going to be an immediate reflection on the city in London. And I think they are going to have the same problem basically, or maybe even worse in London than in Wall Street. The second point I wanted to say, today on the BBC.com, there is only one news about Ukraine. And it's indirectly about Ukraine because it's about the G20. Okay, on all the other news, there is what, 8 news articles? There is just one about Ukraine. And an indirect one. So I think Zelensky propaganda campaign is going to end very soon.
Just one thing. If it's on BBC, it's true. Always remember that.
But I think it's a good image of what the mainstream media in the Western world are saying, you know. That's why I look at it. Because I want to know what they are talking about.
Do you know how many people watch BBC around the world? Do you know how many people? I think the only channel that can challenge BBC is CNN, because apparently they CNN in every single airport in the world.
Yes, why do you think they immediately cut Russia Today in France? They don't cut BBC, they cut Russia Today. They don't want concurrence of opposition from the other media. At least not the Western world media.
First thing they did in UK was cut off the RT here in UK. First day. And the first day, you know.
Same thing in France.
When everyone was like, what's going on in Ukraine? What's going on in Ukraine? There was no RT in UK.
And you only had the BBC and CNN to look at news on TV, okay.
Oh, don't forget Sky News. They are good too.
Ah, Sky News, yes. I forget them. I don't know them.
They are good.
Okay.
With Sky News.
Prata, what do you think of the government?
I think Badcat actually made an amazing perspective about what is in UK. The Brexit actually can be characterized by a completely irresponsible political instability that was no need for. But they haven't had a government that could hold since Brexit. Cameron left, and stupidly, and since then the UK haven't held. At the same time, we see some from these chaos, political chaos. Nevertheless, we have a political line in the UK that goes straightwards. And this political line is, like Shu was traced very well, is one that is trying to survive in the world that they didn't predict that was going to develop, but that has been very mean to them. All the secret trade deals they made around the world before Brexit didn't work. All the ones they tried after Brexit, they didn't work. And the UK is a bit lost in all these. Yes, they maintain some part of control over the financial international market, but it's becoming more and more fringe. And nevertheless, what we see is like a commitment to to be in the forefront of the Ukrainian war. On the other side, it's like they already thinking about the post-Ukrainian war, where they could still maintain some role in the world's finance. I don't know how much this is going to be. This is very hard to say. The UK sanctions actually are more to make propaganda than really to make problems. And this is something, if you guys go look into it, you'll notice that they are not targeting the real big guys. They try to left them behind or to open doors where they can deal with. Abramovich was never really sanctioned in the UK. It says everything is told but not done. But one of the things I understand as much from now, from what Badcat said and Shu, is that, and this corresponds to my perspective, is that the UK now, in terms of the Ukrainian war, is more trying to escalate, to bring to chaos, than really to have a clear goal where they want to come. Because from the chaos, they will be able to find a way out. They notice there is no, in their traditional systems, in their normal structures of power, be it economically, be it influential, like you were talking about BBC and other British media. They are very important in the West, but nobody in the East listens to them. Actually, they are pure propaganda, but the West still buys it. But I think they are also understanding they are losing that grab in the world's explanation, big narratives. So what they're actually, my feeling is that now the UK is more the player that's trying to bring chaos to this problem in order to find some kind of new path within it. But you guys have probably a better perspective of it.
Okay, I just want to ask if someone has something to add about the actual situation, because next I would like to speak about the future situation.
What do you mean, actual situation of what?
Of the British and the Ukraine and Russia.
Well, my position is that Britain finds itself in a very complicated economical situation, with no really geopolitical gap. They are between many worlds, many possible solutions. And that's one of their biggest problems. They are not being successful anywhere. They find like mediocre solutions on the way, but they are not finding a standable solution for the future, where they really play, like Shu was saying, a role where they're always being called upon to tell their opinion or to show their perspective. I think they are being put away. It's a question of time. They're just being used by the Americans because they still have this mediatic power, which is fading away. So once they lose it, it will be very hard. So I think the UK is probably going to, like I was saying before, a project of bringing chaos to everybody in order for them to find a new path.
Okay. So now I have another question for you.
I think the other guys need to answer that as well.
Oh, I see. Oh, if you want to add something? Felix, Shu, nothing more? Okay. So about the future, I think, and a lot of people think so too, that the USA are going to slowly, not stop, but decrease what they are doing in Ukraine. Basically, it's always the same story, okay? For USA stopping this side of the world to concentrate on this side, okay? And even if the Democrat wins the next election, I think there is going to be less and less energy from the United States. And when I speak about energy, I speak about money, about time, about mainstream media attention, about things like that for the Ukraine conflict, and more about Southeast Asia. So London is going to feel very alone. And we know there are other players in this field, very sadly. We have Poland. We have the Baltic states, who have a lot of interest in Ukraine too. And could we see an axe between London, Warsaw, and the Baltic states to create something and to at least continue to actively support Ukraine, even if the United States give less to Ukraine?
Don't write off United Kingdom. You know, doesn't matter how fucked up this government is or the whole country, they're still better than the whole EU. Way better. So before United States get away from UK, they're gonna make sure there is no EU. So UK always gonna be the first choice for United States because they really need UK.
Ah,
UK
that I
still,
agree with you. I'm sure that they not the United States are not going to leave Berlin decide. That's for sure. They are
I
going.
think
They would
United
prefer
States.
London to decide.
Berlin, Rome, Berlin and Rome. This is still United States. People don't want to believe it, but this seats belong to
I
United States.
think the problem is that the UK has a long tradition in following the United Kingdom more or less, if not directly, indirectly, they always follow strategically. But they have their own mind. They always have had their own mind. The problem about Paris, London, Paris, Berlin, or Rome, they sometimes have their own mind that they don't play along. So for the United Kingdom, that has always been a problem, which will always be there. But leaving continental Europe for the UK at this moment doesn't make any sense. The UK is losing more and more power around the world. Their ability to influence the world is getting less. Of course, some guys may see it in the future something else. I'm open to see those arguments. But at this moment, it would be very strange for the United States to abandon continental Europe towards the will of
I don't think they're going to
with the
abandon
UK.
it. You know,
You
I think
know,
they are
it
going
does,
to decrease
it's like,
the amount of time and energy they want to give to the problem.
the West is losing
Yes.
influence in Africa. They no longer welcome in Africa. But if you see, United Kingdom is still welcome in most parts of Africa, even in countries that don't speak English. But in the South, it's different. These people in the South don't want anything to do with the UK. And this is where the people speak English. In South of Africa is where people speak English. There's only two countries who doesn't speak English, which is Angola and Mozambique. The rest speak English. And most
But
of those countries don't want anything to do with the UK. But if you go up north, west, and east, or central, UK still got power there.
Yeah, but
These people still see UK like, the Great Britain. Everyone wants to know what the fuck is Great Britain.
Like, I actually
okay.
think to speak on Shadowi.
Please, one at a time.
This is something France is losing. German lost a long time ago. Spain is like never been there. Portugal, what can I say about Portugal? It's just something from the past. But the UK is still, because France had this thing with the colonies.
Yes, we know the story about France and losing influence in Africa.
But UK,
But
the British
okay,
bank still,
so what do you
still
mean
has-
about the situation in Ukraine? What does that mean?
What does it mean? Yeah, it means UK, like you say, the UK is trying to be relevant
Yes.
when it comes to this war, because The UK have nothing to offer.
Ah, there you go, Vojupov. You were saying they still are important in Central Africa and in the countries that were colonized by British, but I was like thinking, what do the British have to offer? And they do have something to offer.
In Ukraine.
They do have, but what does Britain has to offer? Their education system, those universities. Most of those universities already have around 50% of foreign students. That's their soft power. That will not go away so easy, and will keep going in. But Shu had something to say. I'm very, very interested in listening to what he was going to.
Yeah. So to speak on what Shadowi said, will the UK play more of a role in the future? I think so, because it's 100% in their interest. In some ways, this conflict was almost like the Ukraine war is a room, and the UK and the Americans built this huge door, and then they made a fight in there, and they tossed all of Europe as a collective group. Germany didn't want to go in. France was focused somewhere else. All the small European states, they were obligated because it was a European conflict, right? The UK and the Americans, they said, go do it. And every single time they've reached like a block, like tanks are too much. The UK says, oh, we will send it. You better do as well. Airplanes are too much. We're strongly advocating you guys to send it, but they don't do anything themselves. Missiles, training people outside. So I think the UK is very, very invested. And to actually connect it to what Voz says, like, it's true. Like, the UK is very relevant in the minds of people around the world, and they need to keep it that way. And in some ways, it is an advantage. If you are relevant in places where you don't need to maintain garrisons, like with France, then you can talk as much as you want, do as much as you want with minimal investment. But the UK, I know, like, and also to connect it to Prata's point, I think that they're incredibly terrified, right? That if Eurasia becomes a unified bloc, both economically, linguistically, if things shift away from this like old Anglosphere dominated cultural, economic kind of leadership position, then the UK is going to look at Europe and see a place that respects them even less than they did when, like how they felt when they're in the EU. So I think the best way they can do this is to leverage what we would call like the old word for the intermarium with Poland, Ukraine, the Baltic states that really do feel this conflict, and then stand behind them, provide them a leadership, a unifying role, and then keep them and from allowing Eurasia for further integration. Because I think the greatest fear of the UK actually is probably like Germany, like fully being like connected with Eurasia, and then Europe just shifting away right after that. Because the moment that you let full rail connections go through Ukraine into Germany, then nobody will actually look to the UK as a maintainer of a window to the outside world. So they want to build this wall, and they will fund it.
Yeah, the idea of wall, I think, is everything behind, is what the British really are into it. The so-called intermarrian is a mirage. Most of these countries were just aligning for interest because their position within the European Union was too weak. And Poland and a bit of Czech Republic and Hungary were kind of offering a kind of alternative voice, especially for the two countries in the south that are important, Bulgaria and Romania. But now it's clear that Bulgaria is already in a different level. They are not playing around anymore with the intermarium alliance. And I also question myself, how much could Europe, well, the EU, the center, the core of Europe, which is France, Germany, Italy, could live with that new wall cutting Europe from Asia? How much could they work with it? So actually the Intermarine project is also an anti-European project in a way.
The question for me is also about leadership. in this question, because we know that the leadership in Paris and Berlin is very pro-US, and they are basically going to follow the Western ideology every time, basically. So another point that is really important, I think if the main goal of the British government was to cut the Russia side of Europe to the western side of Europe, it's already done. Today, I think we need at least 50 years before the relation between Moscow and the west of Europe are going to be at a very good level. At least 50 years, because there is so much hate and so much brainwashing in this war that the Europe, like we see it, is already split into blocks.
Well, this is one of the biggest problems many politologues have been talking about. The reaction after the political reaction from 24th of February last year, it was so extreme. It made politicians say things and do things they will regret, and makes it a bit impossible to sit on the table with the Russians, but not just the Russians. This is more than just the Russians. It's a question of time to understand how further it goes. We see the same antagonism, deep antagonism building in the Sahel region in Africa. It's a question of time to even spread more. We see the same antagonism building in South America, especially with the idea of green energy, what Lula Silva just called the green neocolonialism. Oh, everything is building up. But the problem, in my point of view, is of these extreme positions that we're taking after the 24th February 2022 is the populations. It's not, politicians are always, they say a lot of things and then they change their minds and they play the other way around. This is politicians. The problem is the populations. How much are populations actually in Europe, like Shadowi was saying, he put 50 years on it. I don't know if it is so much, because the modern man has a very short memory. He has a very short memory. So in 50 years,
I'm going to object to that, Prata, because when you begin your historyless 5 minutes, you begin basically 200 years ago.
Yeah, but those are old times.
So that means that the event of 100, 200 years ago have an impact of the present.
Yes, but that was
this one is going to have this kind of impact, I think.
Yes, it does have, but I don't think it's the problem. My point here, I was trying to say it's not because the Europeans have, the modern days Europeans have a very short memory. The problem is not the Europeans. The problem is the rest of the world, which has not yet become social constructivist. They don't see the world as a social construction. And the Russians are really geopolitically changing their world. They are not going to come to Europe very easily anymore. So when you say it's like Europe cannot deal with the Russians for 50 years, I don't know if it is 50 years, but I know that if I look at the construction, the geopolitical construction of countries like Russia, China, even India, this is not going, their new perspective of the world is almost ignoring or putting Europe not anymore in a main position, but in a secondary position. And in saying this, it means in 50 years, if the world really keeps it change and keeps doing this, integration with itself, South-South cooperation, South-South globalization, then it doesn't matter what Europeans want in 50 years. They were left behind.
Can I bring a different perspective to this?
Yeah, sorry there.
Just coming back to your comment on the 50 years, that's interesting because I think as soon as this conflict is finished, Europe will try to reestablish, ties with Russia. They're suffering too much from that, the fact that they've cut all the relationship. And let's make a bet. Let's say that if next year Trump wins, it's going to take a few months, not 50 years, before everything was established with Russia.
True. That's
But
true.
let me that's a good segue to the couple of points I wanted to add for the coming back to your question, Shadowi, of the future of this conflict and the UK place in it. I see 3 blocks on the western side, right? There's the US, there's EU, and the UK. And basically, right now, the UK and the EU are fighting for second place. But when the top dog, when the US attention is going to shift very quickly to the election, in a few months, they're going to go full speed in the election. The war is going to be like basically billions in the background going to the war effort. Then it will be the EU and the UK fighting for the position. And right now, one thing that people didn't really notice is the shift in the relationship between Ukraine and the UK. At the beginning, it was with Boris Johnson, very good. Johnson and Zelensky had a very good, friendly relationship. They were talking very, very nicely together. Since the change of leadership with the new PM Sunak in the UK, and especially Ben Wallace, the Minister of Defense, the relationship has not been that good. The latest request from Zelensky, they wanted like a lot of tanks, a lot of like ammunition and military aid. Basically, the comment from Ben Wallace was, "You think the UK is Amazon.com, right?" So that went very badly with Ukraine. So yeah, so they're kind of like shifted the relationship now. Ukraine and the UK is not in a very good relationship, and they are shifting more towards Europe and Germany for military. So I think the lines have crossed now, and the UK is going down, and the EU is going up in that conflict and in the support for Ukraine.
So basically, I misread the situation. You think Ukraine is going to be less involved because they have so much internal problem, but Berlin or Paris could take a more important position.
No,
in the conflict.
They're going to be as involved. It's just that the impact they're making is not going to be as good as before, right?
Okay.
They're going to keep on spending. They're committed to a lot of spend. It's just that it's not going to work as well as before.
And I have another question for you. Do you think Abramovich is going to be able to buy back Chelsea when he's still alive, or his son, or his grandson?
I think he achieved what he wanted to do by buying Chelsea so many years ago. He's done it, right? He bought himself into the British establishment. He was able to prosper and do all the business he needed to do in the UK, make all his investment. What's the point now in buying Chelsea? I mean, anyone buying football...
No, I understand that. It's just some kind of example to illustrate the situation.
No.
When are the Russia oligarch, basically Russia money, are going to come back to London City?
Well,
They
I
are
think
not going
it
to.
can always come back in the way it came in.
It never leave. Okay, sorry.
Yes, they never left. They're still there. The money's
Yeah,
still
yeah.
there.
Yeah, the money is
Yes.
it's frozen. The money is frozen.
No. This is also kind of a mythos. It's not frozen. The UK left as much room as possible for them to keep interacting. They are not completely out of the system. The problem is that new financial marketplaces are appearing into the market, and that's where the UK calculation is going to go wrong. Obviously, we know that when we talk about Dubai, this is British industry. These are not Arabs there. For all the respect for their
Arab money, UK.
It's Arab money. It's Arab neutral. Is secured, but this is British technology. This is British know-how. This is everything about changing them. But the point here is that things are leaving England, even if they are still controlled by British oligarchs and elites. I see it as the biggest lose of the UK. losing the control over international monies. And the same for, even worse, for Switzerland. Switzerland is out of the, this is one of the biggest victories against Switzerland. They were put out of the market on their own. They convinced the Swiss to do it themselves, to kill themselves, to shoot themselves in the head. It's amazing.
Same thing for the Sweden, but in another way.
In another way, yes, quite true.
If,
On Finland too.
if
Finland,
anyone
what's
shot
happening to them.
themselves- If anyone shot themselves in the head, it's the EU.
The problem I see is that when Badcat said in a few years, just after the end of the Ukrainian conflict, well, for that to happen, Badcat, we need something very good to happen, which would be a peace deal with a new security architecture in the world, which what I said, it's like a new kind of United Nations, or not a new United Nations, but a new scheme of United Nations to be born. I don't know if that's possible, but if that would be possible, that would be amazing. Then Europe could deal again with the East. I don't even say just Europe, because we see now how China is also getting away. If you look at the last economical data, it's pretty much clear that even China is decoupling preemptively from Europe and from the US. So for those things to happen, one thing is clear. Asia, which is Russia, China, and even some other countries around the world, are not going to come back to Europe in the same measures and gratitude they used to. So this is over. They will be able to connect and deal with Europe, or in this case, especially Russia, but in very special conditions, and never in a kind of, how can I say, well, in a very, very secured ways, like not putting all your eggs in those baskets. This was always a problem of Russia. The oligarchs, well, privately, they put all their money in the European Union, not understanding how dangerous that is. This is not going to happen anymore. This is over. And even thinking that the Russian frozen money will go back, this is also a mirage. That's over. That's not going to happen. Even with a peace deal, I find it very difficult to happen. Sorry.
Okay, I understand that. The good time for the relation between Russia and Europe, I think, is over. Felix, Badcat thinks it's not over, but I don't agree. I think the mainstream media and the politician put too much weight on the ideological side to allow the reason, the people who use their brain and not their emotion, to take the lead in this situation. Because, of course, it would be for the economy, for the people, the best solution would be to immediately use Russian gas and to repair Nord Stream very fastly. That would be the best things to do for everyone. But they are never going to do it.
I even have another problem, which many European countries already kind of preview. What if Ukraine comes about with all those fanatisms came inside the European Union? What will wait of us? We'll be cut off with all those hates and psychological blockage in the European Union. We can't allow that. So you see, it's like the European powers have somewhere in time to get away of Ukraine as fast as they can. And this will be faster than everybody ever thought. It's very dangerous. If all the European dealings will be measured by how much they will offend the Ukrainian susceptibility, we will be stopped in time. We won't be able to do anything. Anything will be considered like an offense to the Ukrainians. I don't know if you guys are following my thoughts. Yeah. But I think the elites in Europe already understood Now they have to support Ukraine because it's against Russia. But once a peace deal or something happens that will enable them to get out of this conflict, they will piss off they will get away from Ukraine as fast as they can, because otherwise they will kept in a trap, in a psychological trap or ideological trap, like Shadowi was telling us.
Yeah, I really agree, because like like the word peace deal, I think means a very different thing between the UK and EU and also the people of Ukraine. Because if today we had a peace deal, the Ukrainians will actually not see it as a peace deal. They'll see it as a surrender, right? And then at what point can we actually frame a peace deal? Like from the European standpoint, like from UK, EU, what scenario can you actually have a peace deal where you do not have a large part of the Ukrainian population being extremely angry, extremely abandoned? Like, does it involve like them immediately entering the EU? Is that even possible? Like, if you can't even promise something like that, like how can you propose a peace deal? And I think like if you look back in history, whenever there's a large conflict and one side feels like that by signing that peace deal, they didn't get the winning end of like the scenario, it triggers almost like a domino effect of kind of reactionary responses. So depending on what happens and who takes leadership, like is it the UK sitting at that peace deal, Germany sitting at a peace deal, France sitting at a peace deal, US, all four of these people, even if they're all controlled by, let's say, this group of Western political elites, the way the Ukrainians will see it, it'll be very different depending on who signs it and the language and the way they promote it. Or else it'll just be another ceasefire like Minsk, and the Ukrainians won't buy into it, and conflict will start rolling again.
I know one thing. If Russia loses the war, for the peace deal, you are going to have all the Western leaders who are going to be there. If Ukrainians lose the war, there are going to be only the Ukrainian leaders there.
Exactly, right? So at this point, when we look at why it's mapped, right, or the map in general, right, it hasn't moved, right? So those two like dichotomous like examples, the polar examples, is not happening. So how they kind of hash it out in the middle is going to be very difficult, and I don't think any scenario that the majority of Ukrainian people are going to be happy about it.
Oh yes, and that means they are not going to sign it, the peace deal. Okay, on the Russian, we already know that they want more, basically, because they spend a lot of energy in this war, and they don't want to have to fight another one in 10 years. So they are going to make sure that in the peace deal they are going to accept to sign, there is such a condition that the Ukrainian is never going to be able to build basically another army. So it's going to be very hard for Ukraine, the peace deal, whatever is inside it. But Ukraine is going to suffer a lot for this peace deal. If they lose, of course. If they win...
But dear Shadowi, Ukraine lost from the moment it started the war. It doesn't matter what they do. It's very sad, but it's true. They just shouldn't have started the war. Okay, I'm being conflictuous here. I'm saying Ukraine started the war. How can I be so pretentious?
Wow, there is always, the fastest you try to go back in the past, every 20 years, the guilty party side change. So it depends why you decide to put the beginning of the conflict. That's the thing with history. There is no guilty party in a conflict, because everybody has could say that in the past we have this explication and so on, and it works for the two sides of the country. It's very sad, but it's a human thing to try to justify this action, even when they are as evil as invade another country. by seeing in the past. So, yes. But about the topics, there is one thing that you don't speak about is what this war is going to cost to United Kingdom. It had already cost a lot with the energy crisis, inflation, military assets, and influence, a lot of influence, with especially for the mainstream media, for the British mainstream media, they are going to lose a lot of influence with this war, I think. And are they going to lose even more if the war continues? What do you think?
So my quick take on this is that all of the things you mentioned, it's what they're going to lose on, right? So they've already committed a lot of money, right? And we are in a situation in the UK where we can't really afford to waste money. Our public spending is way too high. There's a lot of war efforts. So as the conflict drags on and the problems of the cost of living in the country continue, there will be less and less support from Parliament to continue funding Ukraine as much as the UK is right now. And then on all the other fronts, as the way I see the trend going down for the UK, they're not going to be winning on the geopolitical front. On the political front, there are new election coming next year for the Conservative Party, which is in power, which has been in power for so many years now. They're going to be struggling hard to defend against the Labour. So it's going to be very complicated for the UK. They're soon going to need to refocus on the home ground, right, on the home battles, and that's going to really shift the impact of the UK in the war.
Yes, but is there a peace party in England?
Oh no.
Oh,
so they're going to continue.
There is no
The political debate is not going to be war or peace. The political debate is going to be about something else. And maybe both of the parties are not going to talk about Ukraine.
No, there's a general consensus on the fact that the war is bad and we need to support Ukraine. That's a general consensus in the country, and don't think it's going to change in the foreseeable future. However, what can change is the commitment of the country in helping, right? The amount of money or the focus of the government and the energy they put in that. But no, it's going to be there in the background until there's someone who managed to, do a peace deal.
Okay. Prata, you're thinking?
I think as I said before, I think the UK at this moment is already having a kind of an exit strategy, which is to create chaos. Many of the things they are doing have not really a clear line anymore. So from a chaotic situation, they will try to get the best of it. Why do I say this? Because this has been historically pretty much what the British have been doing all the time. Whenever they think they lost, they will create a kind of a theater, a dramatology, where they always get out winning. If they're going to get out winning, I think most of you guys notice it will be very difficult. So we have to wait. We have to wait. But definitely at this moment, the UK is getting into a split with the European Union how to deal with this war. How much do they lose? They already lost everything they could. So now they are actually trying to pick up what is left.
Yeah, but what is winning for EU or the West in Ukraine? What does it mean winning?
I think today it means the war to stop now. That would be a win for the European Union.
I don't think so.
The media.
You don't think they are desperate enough?
No,
The media
no, they are
is
still not desperate enough. I think this G20, that's why I always said that the war will start stopping around October. This G20 will show the West they lost all their support. And that's when they will understand. They still didn't understand in these days that they lost the war. They will notice it in a few days, months, that there is nothing else to win. There's nothing they can do. And like you were saying, Voz do Povo, until they realize, they still didn't realize, until you realize that the best solution is to stop the war as soon as possible, that will take a long, that still will going to take a while.
Yes.
They are not there yet.
Prata, you forget in one thing, the United States is involved in this war. Actually, this is the United States war. And there is a lot of lunatic in that country. I don't think they are willing to stop this war.
You mean the Ukrainians?
It's an ideological problem.
Even everybody wants to stop it. There is a lot of powerful people willing to carry on.
I think so too.
But
I think it's going to be very hard to stop the war in your Western country.
I don't care who's gonna die, who's gonna suffer, as long as it's not them. They have their own problem. They fight in China economically. And people in Europe are dying. Good for them. They enjoy that kind of shit.
Voz do Povo, I've been having problems and listen to what you're saying. I was just wondering, who is the one actually that is not being able to stop the war? The Ukrainians or the Europeans? Where are the fanatics?
The Americans.
I don't know.
These people, they don't want to stop it.
I think there is some kind of them in every Western country.
In the United States, they don't care about Europe. They don't care what's going on here in Europe, who's dying. If it's Russian, Ukrainian, if Europeans are dying from all the stuff, let them die.
The problem is money, boss. Are they going to spend more money in this war or not?
They have money.
Oh, are you sure?
One thing United States and UK have is money. They have money.
I'm not so sure about that. Because
Badcat
was saying us earlier that there is no longer money.
You want dollar? I've got dollar for you. Everyone wants dollar or pound.
Yes.
Only if
This is one of the things that scare me a lot in UK. In UK, I get scared a lot because, people are getting money from the government. Everyone is claiming, because the living is too expensive. Yes, you have money. The thing is, we have money. Where is the things we need to buy? Where are we going to spend this money? We're going to pay bills? Yeah, gas, electricity. What about food? There's no food. There's money, but there's no food. That's the thing. If you talk about money, money is no problem. Trust me.
So what Voz do Povo is trying to say, and he's correct, the British and the Americans, they have the control of money emissions, so they will print as much as they need. Yes, true. Even if they create such paradox like you have money, but you don't have anything to buy. Yeah, well, it's pretty. Well, we saw that in the UK already in the last 2 years, where where the supermarket shelves are empty. And why are they empty? It's just not. Many reasons are there. But the thing is that in European Union, that is more difficult. The euro is a more fixed monetary system, and there is where we can see a lot of problems coming. And I think they know it, that if the war keeps going on, next year Europe would go bankrupt. And they know that, so that's why we won't have war in the next year.
Okay.
If you see the problem with Ukraine at the moment, they always say, there is 1 billion, there is 5 billion, another 20 billion. Yeah, money is coming. The thing is, they have the money, but where they're gonna buy weapons? United States is not producing a lot. United States
Povo,
is, yeah.
you have a lot of people saying they will give money to Ukraine now.
No,
they are not paying, but they are not giving the money on time. Yeah. And this has been already told by the Ukrainian authorities. It's getting the delays are getting bigger and bigger. They say they will give the money, but they are not already being able to give the money they are promising.
The problem is the money is there, but the product is not.
I think we are not speaking about the same thing. I think Prata is speaking about the direct money given to the government.
No country in Europe is produced. No country in Europe is producing.
Yes, weapons. We understand the problem of the limitation of weapon supply for Ukraine.
The money is there.
Everybody understands that. But we are speaking about the money you give directly to the Ukrainian government.
Ukraine paid Poland for weapons. But the weapon is not there. The money went to Poland.
Yes, we understand all that. But what about the money that the European Union, the British, and the US give directly to the Ukrainian government was?
Oh, they buy houses in Spain. They buy a house in Spain.
Oh, yes, a lot of them. A lot of it, I think. But it's time to think about the closure.
Okay.
It's time to think about the closure. So, Shu, do you have something to add to all of this?
Yeah, so I think for my closure, if you kind of look at it, I think the UK has already prepared itself for a few scenarios. The first scenario is that they keep standing behind and yelling loudly to support the European Union, and they hope that the EU musters all the equipment and follows the UK's lead for the small nominal sums, right? And the second one, I think, is that the UK is actually ready, like in some ways, to lose this conflict, but lose it graciously. Just as Prata said, there's a bit of a theater. We know how many Challenger 2s they gave. We know the name of the Storm Shadow. We know that there were 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers trained in the UK. These are all things that the British can kind of dress up. And at that final moment when they do lose the conflict, they can say, we tried, but there was not enough support by other people, and we tried to rally them. They can fall on that narrative. Germany, France, the rest of the EU, they haven't built a solid kind of like a story that they can tell. And then they can take that story, the UK, and sell it back to the public and say, we tried, but Europe just didn't try hard enough. But the UK, we did our best. So I think when you ask the question, is the UK going to lose more? I think, definitely yes. I think they just want to be kind of seen of the losers. Everybody has lost in wars. People always lose in wars. But at the end of the day, you gotta sell it, and you gotta dress it up so that you look like you've lost the least, and you have gained something. And I think, overall, the general trend of the British is that they've been looking for these almost non-value-based, non-material wins. And if they can grab it from here, they can kind of turn it around and say, we left the European Union to take a leadership role. Brexit was the right decision, but the slow bureaucracy of the EU was not even able to respond to a threat on their doorstep. So I think that's kind of my summary about how the UK can see this self in the future and how they're going to end it.
Okay. Badcat, what do you think for your closure?
Okay, I just want to take a different perspective there. It's the Ukrainian one, right? Because let's be clear, this country is suffering hard. They are being butchered by the hundreds of thousands. They are the battleground for a proxy war between the NATO and Russia. They are testing ground for missiles and tanks that have not been tested by anyone that everyone's very interested in. they are defense contractor heaven, right? So I just hope that any future conflict where a country is going to be in a similar position is going to be radically different, right? We don't want any other country to suffer the fate of Ukraine, which is clearly no one's giving any care of. Everyone's only worried about their own political, economical interests. And I hope this serves as a lesson for other countries, whenever they are involved in such conflict in the future.
Okay, Prata?
Well, thank you, Sue and Badcat. Great perspectives. The idea that the UK is going to find a narrative to get out of this war, being the one that lost the least, is more than obvious. They're already doing it, and well, no, I'm not saying what Shu said. I'm just confirming it. And many may think that their strong wording, their commitment, means that they are ready to go further. No, they are not. On the other side, the idea of trying to split Europe with the intermarium, that might be also an end game of the British. There's still not enough data there. We still don't know how much this is going to be. But this could be also an end game of the British at this time. Well, it's pretty much obvious they are supporting it, because otherwise neither the Poles nor the Americans would be so much supportive of this war. That's my perspective. In terms of what Badcat just said, he is very right. This is a lesson that many countries have to look at. I think we lost the idea what is a proxy war, a real proxy war, since the end of the Cold War, and we see that it has become even worse than it was before. This is really experimental ground. Nobody really cares about Ukrainians. The Ukrainian elite also don't care about Ukrainians or Ukraine. All these battlegrounds where war has been happening, this is land that is wasted for many 10 decades to come. It's completely wasted land, which is very sad. But on the other side, we have to look at the other battlegrounds around the world. What about climate change? You see, the defeat of the West is also their defeat for a couple of other narratives they are trying to impose the world. So if we look at the way the world is reacting towards climate change narratives, green energy narratives, the mechanisms to achieve it, and so on, the new idea of global sovereignty, especially over natural resources and nature as it by itself, it gives also a kind of idea that we are fighting for something much bigger than just Ukraine. So if the West lose in Ukraine, all their narratives come to the floor. Trying to impose countries that have almost no energy to stop using coal, although Germany and many other or Poland and many other European countries are coming back to coal, but it's ridiculous. So we see already in this G20 how everything is falling apart, and I just hope that everybody comes somewhere in time to their senses before something much extreme happens. So that was my final thoughts.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
Vos, any last word?
Yeah. What can I say? The thing is, the West, when you say UK is prepared to lose the war, the West never gonna lose the war, because they go the best thing ever. They have the media. They have the media. No one from the world ever saying that they lost the war in Iraq, Afghanistan, or wherever they have been. They just say, oh, that's it. As long as the media don't talk about it, so no one lost. And when it comes to the UK, you know, the BBC just gonna stop talking about it. They got better things to talk about these days. If a man can get pregnant, you know, if a woman can be a man, that's the things you're gonna listen or watch on BBC for the next 2 or 3 years, you know. And everyone's gonna forget that there was Ukraine. Before that, a lot of people here in UK didn't know. And they just started putting flags up and stuff. And then the flags have disappeared. No one is talking about where the flags no more. Because people were like, fuck, I'm paying a lot on my gas and electricity. For what? For this flag? Fuck that. Yeah, the flag disappeared. You're not gonna see any Ukrainian flag here in the UK. We're in London. And I'm sure there is, if there is no in London, there is no outside London because things start in London. So that's all I gotta say.
Okay. And so my own closure is that I think the British government is really at the front in Ukraine for the support of the war. And I think they are also going to be at the front for the cost of this war. And not only the cost for the own government, but very sadly for the people in the street. And I think the British Islands are going to be one of the places who are going to be the most hurt. I'm speaking about the poor population in the Western Europe about this war. And it's very, very going to be hard. The question that I have is, as leadership in European country, including the United Kingdom, are going to be able to not be blinded by their own ideology? Are they going to be able to make decisions with economical statistics by their eyes and not a political speech? Are they going to be able to avoid the blindness of ideology? Because that's my main problem. I think actually in the Western world, the leaders take their decision not about reason, but because they believe. It's not about science, it's about faith at this point. And it's very, very dangerous. And that's why I don't think we could have peace this years or not even the next years. Because nobody is thinking about the brain, basically. And it's the same thing for the other side, don't worry. So that's my closure. I'm going to end the recording now.